He laughed, not a polite chuckle, a cruel, mocking laugh that echoed through the conference room. Your idea? That's hilarious. Why don't you go fetch me some coffee instead? 3 years later, I stood on the TechRise Awards stage, bathed in spotlight, clutching the trophy and a check for $1.79 million. He'd been quietly forced out months ago. This is how I turned one dismissive laugh into the revenge he'll never forget. My name is Marissa Lane, and at 32, I thought I'd figured out the tech world, senior software engineer at Nuvance Systems in Davenport, Colorado, not Silicon Valley, but close enough to feel the pulse of innovation. The mountains outside my apartment window reminded me daily that I'd climbed far from my small-town roots. Nuvance wasn't Google or Meta, but for a mid-sized company, we punched above our weight in R&D. Or at least, that's what I told myself during those 14-hour days, fueled by cold brew and the stubborn belief that my code could change the world. I specialized in machine learning algorithms, the kind that made computers think almost like humans. Pattern recognition, predictive modeling, the sexy stuff that venture capitalists drooled over. My desk in the corner of the third floor became my second home, surrounded by whiteboards covered in equations and sticky notes with half-formed ideas. But here's the thing about being a woman in tech. You could be brilliant, and they'd still see you as decoration. Dean Radley made sure I never forgot that. 6 feet of swagger wrapped in designer hoodies and limited edition sneakers. Our team lead had perfected the art of casual condescension. He'd lean against my desk, explaining my own code to me like I was a freshman intern. See, what you're trying to do here. He'd start, completely missing the elegant solution I'd already implemented. The other guys worshipped him. Dean had shipped 2 moderately successful apps before joining Nuvance, which apparently qualified him as Steve Jobs reincarnated. He name-dropped constantly. People he'd grabbed drinks with at conferences, investors who totally got his vision. What Dean actually excelled at was repackaging other people's work. I'd watched him do it to Kyle from backend, to Priya from UX. Little suggestions in meetings that mysteriously became Dean's innovations by the time they reached upper management. Lane, you coming to happy hour? He'd ask every Friday, already knowing I'd say no. Not because I was antisocial, but because those happy hours were just another boys' club where they'd discuss strip clubs and crypto while I nursed a beer and counted the minutes until I could leave. I had bigger dreams. Late at night, after everyone else had gone home, I'd work on my real project. A deep learning algorithm that could revolutionize logistics. Real-time route optimization that learned from traffic patterns, weather data, delivery histories. It could save companies millions, reduce carbon emissions, transform how goods moved through the world. Every time I ran the simulations, the results made my heart race. This wasn't just good, this was paradigm shifting. But in Dean's world, paradigm shifts were for people who looked like him, not for women who should be grateful they'd made it past QA testing. He never said it outright. Dean was too smart for HR violations. But the message came through in 1,000 small cuts, talking over me in meetings, forgetting to include me in strategy sessions. That little smirk when I suggested improvements. I told myself I was being patient, building credibility, waiting for the right moment to present my algorithm, to prove that Marissa Lane wasn't just another diversity hire, wasn't just there to make the team photos look progressive. God, I was naive. The storm was coming, and I didn't even see the clouds gathering. But Dean? He'd already decided exactly what I was worth to him. Nothing more than a pretty face who could fetch his coffee. The quarterly planning meeting. That's where everything changed. Picture this. 15 people crammed into conference room B, the one with the broken AC and fluorescent light that flickered like a dying moth. I'd prepared for weeks, refining my presentation, running cost-benefit analyses until the numbers sang. This was it, my chance to pitch the logistics algorithm directly to upper management. I stood up, laptop connected to the projector, my hands steady despite the thundering in my chest. I'd like to propose a new initiative that could reduce our clients' operational costs by 20 to 30%. The room perked up, Even Sandra from finance looked interested. I've developed a deep learning algorithm that integrates real-time data streams, traffic, weather, driver behavior, historical delivery patterns, to create dynamic routing that adapts every 30 seconds. I clicked through my slides, showing the proof of concept, the test results, the staggering potential savings. That's when Dean laughed, not a polite chuckle, not even a skeptical snort. A full-throated, head-thrown-back laugh that filled the room like poison gas. Your idea? He wiped fake tears from his eyes. That's hilarious. What, you think you're Elon Musk now? The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Sandra studied her notepad. Dean, our VP, Marcus, said carefully. Let's hear her out. But Dean was on a roll. Look, I appreciate the enthusiasm. Lane, really? But maybe stick to what you know. Bug fixes, code reviews, the grunt work, launching new products, building startups, that's not really. He gestured vaguely at me. That's more of a leadership thing, a vision thing. He didn't say, man thing. But everyone heard it anyway. I've run extensive simulations. I started. Simulations. He said it like I'd suggested we consult a fortune teller. Marcus, we've got real work to do. The Peterson integration is behind schedule. Maybe Lane could help with that instead of playing entrepreneur. My throat felt like sandpaper. The algorithm works. I have data. Why don't you go fetch me some coffee? Dean interrupted, sliding his empty mug across the table. 3 sugars, then we can discuss where you might actually be useful. Someone, I think it was Brad from sales, actually snickered. I stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably 5 seconds. The presentation still glowed on the screen behind me. All those weeks of work reduced to a punchline. I could fight, make a scene, file a complaint, or I could pick up that mug and pretend this was just another day in Dean Radley's kingdom. I picked up the mug. Sure thing, I said, my voice artificially bright. Anyone else need anything while I'm up? As I walked to the break room, I heard the meeting resume without me. My presentation disappeared, replaced by Dean's quarterly update. By the time I returned with his coffee, 3 sugars, just like he'd demanded, they'd moved on entirely. My slides might as well have never existed. But here's what Dean didn't know. I'd recorded the whole thing on my phone, tucked innocently in my blazer pocket. Legal in Colorado. One-party consent state. Thank God. What he really didn't know was that 3 days later, while I was focusing on bug fixes like a good little soldier, I caught him in his office, huddled over his laptop. On his screen, my algorithm, my code, my revolutionary idea that was apparently too ambitious for a woman but just right for Dean Radley's portfolio. He'd downloaded my test files from the shared drive, stripped my name from the documentation, created a Project Catalyst folder with his name as lead developer. I watched from the hallway as he composed an email to Marcus. Been working on something innovative in my spare time. Think it could be a game changer for our logistics clients. Would love to discuss privately. My hands shook so hard I had to lean against the wall. But somewhere beneath the rage, beneath the betrayal, something else crystallized, clear and cold as mountain ice. I wasn't going to report him. I wasn't going to beg for credit or justice from people who'd laughed at his coffee joke. I was going to disappear, build something he could never steal. And when the time came, I'd show him exactly what this coffee girl was capable of. 2 weeks later, I submitted my resignation. Personal reasons, I told HR. Family stuff. Dean barely looked up when I cleaned out my desk. Best of luck, Lane. Sure you'll land somewhere. Appropriate. I smiled sweetly. I'm sure I will. He had no idea that somewhere would be the stage where I'd accept an award worth more than his entire career. But he'd learn. Oh. Would he learn? Ashtonville. Oregon was nothing like Davenport. No tech campuses, no startup meetups, no Dean Radleys. Just fog rolling off the Cascade Mountains and a downtown where the fanciest restaurant was a Thai place run by a grandmother who knew everyone's order by heart. My college roommate, Jen, had offered her guest room indefinitely. Stay as long as you need, she'd said, not pressing for details about why I'd left a six-figure job to sleep on her lumpy futon. That's true friendship, knowing when not to ask questions. For the first month, I barely left the house. I coded 18 hours a day, fueled by rage and instant ramen. The algorithm I'd shown at Nuvance, child's play compared to what I was building now. Without Dean's constant interruptions, without meetings about meetings, without having to dumb down my ideas for male egos. My mind exploded with possibilities. I integrated predictive weather modeling that could anticipate storm delays before meteorologists. Added machine learning that studied driver fatigue patterns. Built in dynamic pricing models that balance speed with cost in real time. The code flowed like water. Elegant and powerful. 6 months in, I had a working prototype that made my new Vans presentation look like a kindergarten drawing. That's when I met Claudia Reyes. I'd ventured to Portland for a Women in Tech conference, one of those events Dean used to mock as diversity theater. Claudia was the keynote speaker, 62 years old with silver hair and the kind of presence that made CEOs nervous. Former Microsoft executive who'd been pushed out in the 90s for being too aggressive. Translation, she didn't smile enough while being brilliant. "You're hiding something," she said after my lukewarm presentation about exploring new opportunities. We grabbed coffee afterward. Real coffee, not the kind fetched on command. "Show me," Claudia said simply. So I did. Right there in the hotel lobby, I pulled up my laptop and ran a live demo. Watched her eyes widen as the algorithm processed 10,000 delivery routes in seconds, optimizing each one beyond human capability. "Who else knows about this?" she asked. "No one." "Good." She leaned back, studying me like a chess player. "I've got $100,000 that says you're going to change the world, 10% equity, and I'll teach you everything those bastards never wanted you to know." My hands trembled as I shook hers. StreamPath AI was born in that handshake. Claudia didn't just bring money. She brought wisdom forged in battles I'd only begun to fight. "First rule," she said during one of our late-night strategy sessions, "hire women. Not for diversity metrics. Because they're hungry, because they've been overlooked, because they'll work twice as hard to prove what we already know." So I did. Sarah, a database architect who'd been passed over for promotion 5 times at Amazon. Ming, a UI designer whose male colleagues kept forgetting to credit her. Rachel, fresh from MIT, top of her class but somehow only getting offers for junior positions. We worked out of a converted warehouse in Portland's industrial district. No ping-pong tables or beer taps, just whiteboards, determination, and the best code any of us had ever written. "You know what I love about this?" Sarah said one night as we debugged a particularly nasty integration issue. "No one's explaining my own work to me." The prototype became a beta. The beta became a product. Our first client was a small Pacific Northwest delivery company tired of losing money to inefficient routing. We saved them $40,000 in the first month. Word spread the way it does in tech, quietly at first, then all at once. We pitched to larger companies, won contracts, hired more women who'd been told they weren't leadership material. Our office expanded from 1 floor to 2. The code I'd started in Jen's guest room now powered deliveries across 3 states. But the sweetest moment? When I legally trademarked the core algorithm, the same one Dean had tried to steal, every variation, every implementation, every possible permutation. Mine. Protected. Untouchable. "You're different," Claudia observed one evening as we reviewed quarterly projections. "Harder." I thought about Dean's laugh, about fetching his coffee, about watching him steal my work like I wasn't even human. "Good," I said. 18 months after leaving Nuvance, StreamPath AI had 12 employees, 3 major clients, and revenue projections that made venture capitalists salivate. We were invited to bid on enterprise contracts, featured in TechCrunch, nominated for innovation awards. I'd built something Dean could never steal, never claim, never diminish. But more than that, I'd built it without asking permission, without seeking approval, without making myself smaller to fit in someone else's shadow. The revenge wasn't complete yet. But like the best algorithms, it was learning, growing, optimizing itself for maximum impact. Dean Radley had no idea what was coming. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning. Zephyr Go Logistics, one of the largest shipping companies on the West Coast, was soliciting bids for a complete routing system overhaul. Contract value, $1.79 million. This is it, Claudia said, reading over my shoulder. This is our Tesla moment. My hands were steady as I typed our response. 2 years of preparation had led to this. StreamPath AI wasn't just ready, we were hungry. What I didn't know was that 300 miles away, in a conference room I once knew too well, Dean Radley was reading the same email. The tech world talks. Through the grapevine of LinkedIn connections and conference gossip, I'd heard things. Nuvance was struggling. Their revolutionary Project Catalyst, my stolen algorithm wrapped in Dean's incompetence, had failed spectacularly. Clients complained about bugs, inefficiencies, promises that couldn't be delivered. Because Dean could steal code, but he couldn't steal the understanding behind it. Marcus had quietly put Dean on performance review. The Golden Boy was tarnishing fast, so when Zephyr Go announced their vendor selection conference, a 3-day showcase where finalists would present their solutions, I knew Dean would be there. Nuvance needed this contract to survive. Dean needed it to save his career. Perfect. We prepared like warriors. Every slide, every demo, every line of code polished to perfection. My team worked 18-hour days, not because I demanded it, but because they believed. Sarah optimized our database queries until they sang. Ming designed an interface so intuitive, a child could use it. Rachel stress-tested the system with scenarios that would make NASA jealous. "You sure you're ready for this?" Claudia asked the night before we flew to San Francisco. "I've been ready for 2 years." The Moscone Center buzzed with nervous energy. Tech's biggest players had come to play. Oracle, SAP, Microsoft subsidiaries. And tucked between them, 2 smaller contenders, Nuvance Systems and StreamPath AI. I wore my best suit, the power one. Charcoal gray with lines that meant business. My team flanked me, all of us walking like we belonged, because we did. The presentation schedule was posted outside the main conference room. My stomach dropped, then soared. StreamPath at 2 p.m. Nuvance at 2:45 p.m. We'd present first. Dean would have to follow whatever we showed. At 1:55 p.m., I stood outside those doors, remembering another conference room, another presentation, another version of myself who'd fetched coffee instead of fighting back. "Ms. Lane?" A volunteer smiled. "They're ready for you." The room was smaller than I'd expected. Intimate. 8 executives around a polished table, tablets ready, expressions neutral. I set up my laptop, noting the Nuvance team already seated in the back row, waiting their turn. That's when I saw him. Dean looked older. Stress had carved lines around his eyes, and his designer hoodie couldn't hide the slump in his shoulders. He was scrolling through his phone, probably reviewing last-minute notes, completely unaware. Until I spoke. "Good afternoon. I'm Marissa Lane, CEO of StreamPath AI." His head snapped up like I'd slapped him. The phone actually tumbled from his hands, clattering on the floor. His face cycled through emotions, confusion, recognition, disbelief, and finally, pure fear. I smiled professionally and launched into my presentation. For 30 minutes, I demolished every transportation assumption in the room. Live demonstrations showed our algorithm processing millions of data points instantly. Real client testimonials praised efficiency gains that seemed impossible. The cost savings made CFOs lean forward in their chairs. But the masterpiece? When I explained our proprietary learning system, the one that adapted to each company's unique needs, that grew smarter with every delivery, that turned logistics from guesswork into science. "This core technology," I said, clicking to a slide showing patent numbers, "is protected by comprehensive intellectual property filings. We've been developing it for over 3 years, refining every aspect to ensure it's not just innovative, It's irreplaceable. In the back row, Dean had gone pale. He knew that algorithm. He'd tried to steal it, tried to replicate it, failed to understand it. And now he was about to present his inferior version to the same audience. Questions? I asked sweetly. The Zephyr Go executives peppered me with technical queries, each answer demonstrating depths Dean could never reach. His team shifted nervously. Someone whispered urgently in his ear, probably suggesting they modify their presentation, somehow adapt to what they'd just seen. Too late. As I packed up my laptop, I made sure to walk past their row, stopped just long enough to make eye contact with Dean. He looked like he might be sick. Good luck with your presentation, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I'm sure it will be appropriate. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. I left that room knowing two things. StreamPath AI had just won a $1.79 million contract, and Dean Radley's career was over. I should have left the building. Victory was already mine. I could feel it in the executives' engaged questions, see it in their impressed nods. But some hungers demand complete satisfaction. I slipped into the back row as Dean took the stage. He was sweating through his hoodie. His hands shook as he connected his laptop. The confident swagger I remembered had evaporated, leaving a man who looked like he'd aged 5 years in 5 minutes. Good afternoon, he croaked, then cleared his throat. I'm Dean Radley from Nuvance Systems, here to present Project Catalyst. The temperature in the room had changed. Where my presentation sparked excitement, Dean's arrival brought skepticism. The executives who'd leaned forward for me now sat back, arms crossed. His first slide appeared, my algorithm. Butchered and simplified, wrapped in corporate buzzwords that meant nothing. Synergistic routing solutions and paradigm-shifting logistics optimization. Empty phrases trying to dress up stolen goods. Our revolutionary system, Dean continued, his voice finding some of its old confidence, which I've been developing for the past 2 years. Excuse me. Sandra Chen, Zephyr Go's Chief Technology Officer, interrupted. This looks remarkably similar to what we just saw from StreamPath. Can you explain the differences? Dean's Adam's apple bobbed. Well, of course there are similarities in the space, but our implementation is inferior, I thought, watching him fumble through technical explanations he didn't understand. He pulled up a live demo. The interface, clunky compared to Ming's elegant design, loaded slowly. When he input test data, the system processed it at half the speed of ours. Worse, the output routing made no sense. His bastardized version of my algorithm was guessing, not learning. Why did it route the Portland delivery through Seattle? Another executive asked. That adds 90 miles. The system is still learning, Dean stammered. With more data, StreamPath's system adapted in real time. Someone noted, without training periods. The presentation became a slow-motion car crash. Every slide revealed another flaw, another shortcoming, another piece of evidence that Dean had built a house of cards on a foundation he'd never understood. He'd stolen my notes, but not my knowledge. My code, but not my comprehension. 20 minutes in, his demo crashed entirely. The screen went blue, the death knell of any tech presentation. I can restart it, he said desperately, clicking frantically. Just give me. That won't be necessary, Sandra Chen said coolly. We've seen enough. But the killing blow was yet to come. Marcus Winters, Nuvance's VP, stood up from the back row. I hadn't noticed him arrive. His face was stone as he addressed the room. I apologize for wasting everyone's time, he said. It's become clear that Project Catalyst has been misrepresented. Dean, we need to talk. Now. The room went silent. Dean stood frozen at the podium, laptop still showing its blue screen of death, watching his career implode in real time. But the contract, he started, is no longer your concern. Marcus cut him off. Security will help you gather your things. As Dean was escorted out, he passed my row. Our eyes met for one brief moment. Gone was the arrogance, the dismissive smirk, the casual cruelty. All I saw was a man who'd just realized that the coffee girl he'd laughed at had orchestrated his complete destruction. I didn't smile, didn't gloat, just watched him disappear through those doors, knowing he'd never walk through them again. After the room cleared, Sandra Chen approached me. Impressive presentation, Ms. Lane? Both of them, actually. I'm not sure what you mean. She smiled knowingly. The best revenge is massive success, isn't it? We'll be in touch about the contract. That evening, my team celebrated at a rooftop bar overlooking the bay. Champagne flowed, laughter echoed, and Sarah made a toast. To Marissa, who showed them all what we're capable of. But I stood apart for a moment, looking out at the city lights, thinking about conference rooms and coffee mugs and the long road between humiliation and vindication. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I'm sorry, I was wrong. Can we talk? Dean. I deleted it without responding. Some conversations were finished before they began. Claudia appeared beside me, wise eyes taking in my expression. Feeling satisfied? Getting there, I said. She clinked her glass against mine. Good. Because this was just the beginning. She was right. Within a week, Zephyr Go would call with their decision. Tech journalists would start sniffing around the story of Nuvance's implosion. And Dean Radley would learn that in Silicon Valley, reputation was everything, and his was destroyed. But tonight, I simply sipped champagne and watched the city sparkle, knowing that somewhere out there, Dean was packing his desk, deleting his LinkedIn title, wondering how the coffee girl had engineered his downfall so perfectly. The answer was simple. I'd stopped asking for permission to be brilliant, and that changed everything. The call came at 9 a.m. sharp, 3 days later. Sandra Chen's voice was warm but professional. Congratulations, Misty Lane. Zephyr Go would like to move forward with StreamPath AI. The contract is yours. $1.79 million, the number that would change everything. I thanked her calmly, professionally, then hung up and screamed so loud that Sarah came running from the next room. Within minutes, our entire office erupted. Tears, champagne at 9:15 a.m., Rachel literally dancing on her desk. But the universe wasn't done with its gifts. That afternoon, TechCrunch ran a story. Nuvance Systems in turmoil. VP of Engineering terminated after failed Zephyr Go bid. The article was brutal, detailing Dean's pattern of appropriating team members' work and catastrophic mismanagement of Project Catalyst. Anonymous sources, bless whoever talked, confirmed he'd been escorted out by security. My phone exploded. Journalists wanted interviews. Former colleagues from Nuvance reached out with congratulations and horror stories about Dean I'd never heard. Turns out I wasn't his first victim, just his last. Marissa Lane, you're trending, Ming said, showing me her phone. Coffee girl. Revenge was actually trending on tech Twitter. Someone had leaked the story of Dean's coffee demand and my subsequent rise. The internet loved it. Within a week, I was booked on 3 podcasts and a morning show. The narrative wrote itself. Woman scorned builds empire, destroys sexist tormentor, wins $1 million contract. American dream meets justified revenge. From the engineer who was told to fetch coffee to the CEO of a company worth millions. The host introduced me. Marissa Lane joins us to talk about turning rejection into rocket fuel. I kept my answers measured, professional. Never mentioned Dean by name. I didn't have to. Everyone knew. But when asked what advice I'd give to women facing similar situations, I let my edge show. Stop asking permission, I said, looking directly into the camera. They're laughing at you anyway. Might as well give them something real to worry about. The clip went viral. 14 million views in 2 days. StreamPath AI's website crashed from traffic. My inbox flooded with resumes from brilliant women tired of being overlooked. Venture capitalists who'd never returned my cold emails suddenly wanted lunch. We were featured in Fortune's Startups to Watch, But my favorite moment came 2 weeks later, a Wednesday afternoon. Jen forwarded me a LinkedIn post from someone at Nuvance. Dean's desk, the one where he'd stolen my code, now belonged to Priya Patel, the UX designer he'd marginalized for years. She'd been promoted to lead technical architect. The photo showed her sitting there, coffee mug in hand, smile radiant. The caption? Sometimes the best ideas come from unexpected places. Excited to lead Nuvance's new chapter of inclusive innovation. I smiled at my screen. Priya deserved that desk, that title, that vindication. As for Dean, LinkedIn showed he'd updated his status to seeking new opportunities. Then, open to contract work. Then, nothing. The tech world has a long memory for spectacular failures, especially when they involve stolen code and public humiliation. He messaged me twice more. The first, a long rambling apology blaming stress, competition, the culture. The second, shorter. I need a reference, please. I never responded, not out of cruelty, but because we had nothing to discuss. He'd shown me who he was in that conference room. I'd simply returned the favor. Ma'am. Rachel knocked on my door. The film crew is here. Right. We were being featured in a documentary about women in tech. They wanted to film in our offices, interview the team, capture the StreamPath story. I stood, straightened my blazer, not the power suit anymore, just comfortable clothes for a CEO who'd earned her comfort, and walked out to greet them. Is it true, the director asked as we shook hands, that this all started with someone demanding you fetch coffee? That's how it started, I agreed, but that's not how it ends. Because the truth was, Dean's humiliation was just punctuation. The real revenge was this: a thriving company. Brilliant women doing their best work. Innovation that actually changed lives. The $179 million contract was sweet, but watching my team grow into their power, that was the victory. Still, I kept a coffee mug on my desk, the same one I'd fetched for Dean that day. Now it held my pens. A daily reminder that the best revenge isn't just success. It's success that makes them remember every time they laughed at you. And Dean Radley? He'd remember until the day he died. That was a promise. The director was still talking, asking about filming schedules, but I was already thinking ahead. Zephyr Go was just the beginning. We had 10 more contracts in the pipeline, 50 resumes to review, a world to change. Where should we set up? She asked. I smiled. Conference room B, trust me, it has the perfect lighting. It was time to rewrite every story that room had ever told. The office was empty, 10:47 p.m. on a Thursday, and even Sarah had finally gone home. I sat alone in the conference room, our conference room B, nothing like Nuvance's, staring at the signed contract spread across the table. $1.79 million. The number still felt surreal. I poured myself a glass of the good wine, the bottle Claudia had given me, for when you need to celebrate alone. She understood. Some victories were too personal for public consumption. The city lights sparkled beyond the windows. Portland quiet in that way tech hubs never quite achieve. No urgent pings, no last-minute fires to fight. Just me, the contract, and the weight of what we'd built. I thought about calling someone, my mom, maybe, or Jen. But this moment wasn't for sharing, not yet. Instead, I let myself remember, really remember. The taste of humiliation when Dean's laughter filled that room. The tremor in my hands as I carried his coffee, 3 sugars, like he was marking territory. The nights I'd coded until my eyes burned, driven by rage so pure it felt like fuel. Now as LinkedIn showed, looking for new opportunities in logistics, supply chain. Good luck with that. Dean. The industry knew exactly who killed Project Catalyst. But here's what surprised me. I felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction from his downfall. Because somewhere between that conference room and this one, I'd stopped caring about Dean Radley entirely. He was just a catalyst, lowercase, unlike his failed project. A chemical reaction that transformed me from someone who asked permission to someone who took what was hers. My phone buzzed. A text from Ming. "You still at the office? Go home and celebrate." I smiled but didn't move. Not yet. The wine was good, expensive, the kind successful CEOs drank while contemplating their next move. We had 12 employees now, soon to be 30. The ZephyrGo implementation would establish StreamPath as a major player. More contracts would follow, more growth, more chances to lift up the overlooked, the underestimated, the told to fetch coffee. But that was tomorrow's revolution. Tonight, I sat with my success. No witnesses, no social media posts, no performative celebration. Just me and the proof that they'd all been wrong. I picked up the pen Dean would have killed to hold and signed my name on the contract's final page. Marissa Lane, CEO, the girl who'd fetched coffee, the woman who'd built an empire. The pen felt perfect in my hand. Somewhere out there, Dean was probably scrolling through job boards, wondering where it all went wrong. Let him wonder. I had companies to transform, women to empower, paradigms to actually shift. I finished the wine, tucked the contract into my briefcase, and turned off the lights. Tomorrow, we'd announce the deal. The media would feast. StreamPath AI would officially arrive. But tonight was just for me. As I walked to my car, a Tesla, because symbolism matters, I didn't look back at the office. No dramatic pause, no movie moment, just forward motion. The way it had been since I'd walked out of New Vance. The parking garage echoed with my heels on concrete. Powerful steps from someone who'd learned to take up space. My phone showed 17 missed calls from reporters, 43 unread emails, 6 venture capitalists suddenly interested in Series A funding. They could all wait until morning. I drove home through empty streets, thinking about the girl who'd carried that coffee mug with shaking hands. Would she believe this ending? Would she have found the strength if she'd known what was coming? Didn't matter. She'd found it anyway. My apartment was quiet, high enough to see the city spread below like a circuit board. I set the contract on my kitchen counter, poured another glass of wine, and stood at the window. No toast, no words, just acknowledgement of a promise kept. They'd laughed at me once. They'd never laugh again. The city pulsed with possibility. And somewhere in those lights was the next woman being told to fetch coffee, to stay quiet, to know her place. Maybe she'd hear about StreamPath. Maybe she'd realize permission was just another cage. Maybe she'd build something magnificent from her rage. I raised my glass to her, whoever she was, then finished my wine, left the contract on the counter like any other Tuesday, paperwork, and went to bed. The revenge was complete. The real work? That started tomorrow, and I could hardly wait. Thank you for listening to my story. I'm curious, where are you listening from? Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Have you ever turned rejection into your greatest motivation? I'd love to hear your story too.